All right, we are good and we are live. Let's see, today is March 2nd, Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021. Let's start by indicating who's here. We're starting with Terry.
Harry Bodden.
Julie Jackson.
Nicole McDermott.
Martin Bates, Superintendent.
Connie Burgess.
Chris Wynn.
Karen Winder, and I believe we have Clark Nelson joining virtually. Clark?
He texted me to let me know he's still stuck in court, and he will join us as soon as he's able.
Okay. Excellent. We'll have him on standby and he can jump in as soon as he's able to. We'll turn the time over to Martin. We have some administration reports tonight.
Thank you, board members. Let's start. It's going to be a little bit of a Rick Anthony show here for a bit. Board members, a number of you have heard over time concerns about our student information system, and you may recall 4 or 5 years ago we actually did a survey of all of our employees to ask them how they felt about the current SIS, and number-wise, overwhelmingly, they supported it. They wanted the one that we had. There's a group that we called power users that were not pleased with some of the utility. And so we've gone on for a while, but we've gotten to a tipping point about a year ago, I think, where really folks said, you know, there's got to be, let's see if there's not something better. So we have put a committee together, an RFP, a request for proposal committee. They've been working on that, and Rick's going to update us on that. One of the things that a number of people, and you've heard this, say, well, you know, why doesn't Canvas just talk to Gradebook, and why don't we just use Canvas? Well, Rick's going to, we'll say it 4 times. So I'll say it now, and then you can say it again a couple of times. There's a difference between a student information system where all of the student information resides, everything from discipline through their medical, what immunizations they've got, so on, and a learning management system, which is an instructional tool that a teacher uses to communicate with students and with parents. And so there's an overlap and there's a confusion there. And so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that a little bit. So we're talking about the student information system. So Rick, go right ahead.
Board Superintendency, thank you. I am going to try and do that in a timely fashion, articulate the differences between an LMS and an SIS, Student Information System and Learning Management System, but also hit on the RFP process a little bit as well. Just kind of, that might be review for some, but also just speaking to the RFP process and what we're doing with our SIS RFP. Really quick, Student Information System is different than a learning management system. Student Information System, our product is branded or named Discovery, and it's made by a company out of California called ESD, Educational Solutions Development. An SIS is really your backbone that a lot of other systems connect to. Information systems department oversees our student information system. I bulleted the major components of what an SIS is: information storage, master schedule building, individual student scheduling, gradebook, and a parent and student portal. And I'm going to dive into each of those a little bit, just give you some detail in each of those. This is important to know because it is what distinguishes Discovery from an LMS or Canvas. Canvas is the LMS that we use. On the information storage side, all of these things are housed in our SIS. And I've added entry, visualization, and reporting. It's not just storage, it allows for entry into, so you're entering information into that storage. It allows for visualization of that information, meaning on the screen it can show you and tell you information, and then creating reports as well. These are all pieces in the SIS that are quite important, and different power users or user groups want. They want to be able to enter the information. They want to be able to see the information. They want to be able to have reports on the information. The information is everything on that, every bulleted piece there, from demographics to discipline. All of those types of things are entered. All of those things can be visualized or seen on screens, and all of those things can have reporting. At the bottom of the slide, I've tried to indicate which user groups uses these things the most. So we have secretaries, registrars, counselors, and administrators who use these things the most. Teachers don't really use these things much, but those groups do. And so that's a big part of that those individuals' jobs is working in Discovery, our SIS, on those things. In the scheduling module, this is creation and management of a master schedule. So if you've been in any of the schools or on a community council, et cetera, and they talk about the master schedule and I'm building the master schedule, it's done on a computer. It's done in a platform. It's done in the SIS. They might use Excel to kind of visualize all the different class periods and when. They might even use the magnetic board in someone's office too. You might have seen that in a secondary school. But where that's entered in is into the SIS. And then the SIS takes all those students, takes the schedule they want, takes the framework that's been designed, and tries to schedule those for the master schedule builder. Typically, that's an assistant principal in high school. Sometimes that's a counselor or a principal in a junior high. Connie?
So do they have to do that individually, or does this system help them do it also?
The system helps them.
Okay.
So you'll hear them say things like, I got a 77% run. That's actually quite great in the high school. So that means when I made the schedule, I made the framework, and then I entered in everything the kids want, 77% of the kids got the schedule that they wanted. That means 33% have to be hand done.
Okay.
And that's not always a complete schedule. It might mean a counselor has to touch that 33% to finish out their schedule.
There is a lot of data input that goes into that though, Connie.
Yeah.
There's a lot of data input that goes into it.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Typically, that's the cards. So we see students' cards and someone's entering in all the requests
Right.
from the cards. We've started shifting to online registration now, though, where someone goes in and requests. That saves some of that hand entering.
Rick, can you just tell me a little more about that? Like, have we just done that at a couple schools? What level?
I think actually an upside of COVID is I think that really pushed us to a higher level of doing that than ever before. If you asked me to give percentage off the top of my head, I'd say 60 to 70% of our schools are doing it online.
And when you say online, that means the student goes in and puts their schedule in that they
Digitally.
want.
Digitally.
And then the computer uses some algorithm to determine what period they have which subject.
Correct.
Okay, and is that happening? I guess that's happening on the secondary level because
Correct.
schedules are not hard on the elementary level.
Right.
So now they're not,
Okay.
but they're not scheduling through Discovery. They're scheduling, like, they're submitting it through like a Google Doc or a Google form or whatever. And then somehow they're communicating that into Discovery. So there's still a lot of input and there's still a lot of footwork for our counselors and our counseling secretary to do, right?
Oh,
Correct. Correct.
So it's not, is there a way?
Not as
is
much
there?
as cards, but
Sure.
it's not touch free.
Well, and let's be clear, 100% of our secondary schools are using the computer scheduler.
Correct.
They're not all using
Registration.
online registration.
Yes.
and does it seem like we are going to be able to have that capability in Discovery at some point? Do we know if they're moving in that direction?
Yes. I think we're going to see more and more of that.
Okay.
Single student scheduling, that bullet is, I'm a counselor and a student comes into my office and wants a schedule change. I use Discovery, I use our SIS to make that schedule change. So primary user groups, again, administrator and counselors, these are schedule builders or people who day to day are working with student schedules. The gradebook module, this primary user group are teachers. So in the gradebook module, the things that they do, attendance, assignments / assessments, scores, progress, grades. You'll notice I have a little bit of a gap and I have two other bullets, traditional and proficiency based. We have two systems kind of going on right now in gradebook as we slowly progress to more and more proficiency based. Elementary's
Come up with that.
for the most part is all proficiency based. Secondary is working its way up with proficiency based through 9th grade this year. We do have 11th and 12th grade teachers using proficiency based, but my point of it is we have going to have two different structures going on simultaneously right now with Gradebook.
Now, Rick, so a couple years ago, we really stressed the need for a very easy to use Gradebook app that has not come to fruition yet. I mean, we kind of had a sort of one, but it wasn't really what the board was asking for. So I'm hopeful that you're considering that as well as you
That'll be in
look
the,
specifically at Gradebook, RFP, those kind of things.
yep, it will
So
be
we
in the
can have an
RFP.
easy touch use app that every parent and student can have on their phone.
Yes,
Okay.
that will be in the RFP. And a piece that the superintendent alluded to is we kind of hit a tipping point where we wanted to RFP for a different SIS as well. And that's for, I mean, we could list out a lot of reasons. Every user group has their own things they like and dislike. But a theme that we hear often is this usability and friendliness and touch and feel of other SISs compared to the one we currently have. So we're very aware of that.
Just sorry.
What is RFP?
Request for proposal.
Request for proposal, and I will get to that portion, Julie, as well, and kind of go through that big picture of that.
Nicole?
My question real quick, I just wonder if this has changed at all since the dinosaur age when I used it, but with Gradebook, is there accessibility directly to, like, if you have a student that's failing, can I click on that student and pull up their information, be able to email? Or do you have to go back into the SIS and go to contact information in order to get that? What's the process of that?
You can do it out of Gradebook.
You can do it out of Gradebook. Okay, so it is stored in there.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
And when we started the proficiency-based grading situation, did I guess that ESD Discovery just created that code for us?
Correct.
And so we are constantly working on that to make it exactly how we want it, as we are a little bit fluid in how we're figuring out how to make this perfect.
Correct. So for example, a piece that we'll be curious about through an SIS is, say, our decision around recency.
Mhm.
We are going to need the ability with whoever's selected for some customization, perhaps, if that's not already on their roadmap.
Right. Okay.
Parent portal, this is entry and visualization, meaning parents can update information using the portal, and then they also can see information using the portal. And I've just bulleted all the different things that are available through the portal, from data to attendance to history to assessment history, registration, course requests, et cetera. The primary user groups here are students and parents. I wanted to point out with this slide, outside systems. So I had called the SIS the backbone once before, and that's how I think of it. All of these things are appendages that connect or talk to the SIS, or have to get data from and share data back and forth with the SIS. So I won't read through every single bullet there, but it kind of gives you a sense of this backbone idea and how everything connects to it. And that's important as we move forward and kind of get to costs and also change costs. So this thinking that with a backbone transplant, that's a big deal. And that's going to have to mean some thinking and some time. And there's going to be some rehab, for lack of a better word, of a change in your backbone.
So this is basically all of the district function. All of these are district parts of the district
Correct.
that all use that same system.
Correct. They all talk to
Wow.
the SIS. They all get their data and push their data to the SIS.
Just two quick examples. For example, when Ben wants to send something out to all of the parents, he doesn't have a database of everybody's email address. He draws that out of our SIS. When transportation does its pickups, their stops, as they're drawing their maps, they don't have everybody's address. They pull that out of the SIS too. So the transportation software has to talk with the SIS software. The communication email software has to talk with the SIS software. So yeah, it's a big It's a big deal.
And so each of these has their own software.
Correct. They can be different platforms. Yes.
The danger is there are some companies that try and do a total package, but then they don't do anything really well. And so that's the balance. Do we buy a really good solid backbone and then plug and play, or do we buy a comprehensive package where, because companies buy each other out and then say,
Yeah.
look, I've got the module,
Yeah,
but they don't talk real well. So this is an evolving,
Uh-huh.
difficult situation.
Yeah, the business model in this world, and I don't live in this world, but I've seen some of it is, if I'm a major player, I'm a big SIS, I like to acquire smaller startups who might do something like this better than what I am able to, or if I'm not, I like to go buy them up and make it part of my conglomerate. Look, buy me because I can do all of these things under one umbrella.
But in the meantime, perhaps they say, oh, and see, we've got this transportation software, but they will only connect with the transportation software that they've acquired and not with other.
Two
softwares?
things, usually absolutely the one they've acquired, and they'll connect at a price, right? So they'll charge for some, I'm not going to use the right information systems
Programming time.
language. Programming time to be able to make them talk together. Yeah.
So how long have we had Discovery?
Oh, wow.
A long time.
20 years?
No, because
15
QSS
years?
had an SIS. QSS was business
Yeah,
and SIS. So-
2003, 2004, I think I was using QSS.
Yeah, so 15, 16 years.
Yeah. It's been a while. The last bullet there is a learning management system. And I wanted to spend a minute on that because there can be some convolution between our product that we use, Canvas, and Discovery.
Hey,
Yeah.
Rick, before you move on to
Yeah.
that, who are the other major players in the SIS world? Is it PowerBook and Skyward or
Yeah, so
other people
some of the
too?
big ones that we see, especially close to us here in the Valley, Skyward and Power School. And then Infinite Campus has started to come onto the scene.
Is Infinite Campus what Nebo just bought?
Correct. Correct.
And would you say that each of those kind of provides the comprehensive?
They're big
Package.
players who acquire up little guys.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's how I would phrase it. They might take exception to that, but that's how I would explain it.
There's a little bit, and it's kind of, if fun's the right word, and it's probably not, but as superintendents talk to each other, there's a little bit of that picture where the cows are at a corner and they're all eating out of the next field. So if you're in our system, you talk to somebody in Jordan District and you say, oh, what they've got so much better. But if you're in Jordan, they're saying, you know what they've got in Canyons is so much better. And if you're in Canyons, they say, I really like what they're doing in Granite. So there's a bit of that underway as well.
Yeah, and I think I would piggyback on that with, it depends on the user group sometimes.
Yes.
So one user group might be, I really like this one, but I don't like this one as much. And a different user group says, I really like this one over here, but not that one. So there can be a little variance depending on your role and position.
And I'm sorry to just keep asking about competitors here, but since they're kind of bigger players, what is the opportunity for customization? Because we would need that very seriously, right? I mean,
Yeah, I think they'll always respond, tons of opportunity. It's more a question of price.
yeah, okay.
So last bullet, there's learning management system, and our SIS Discovery connects to a product made by Instructure called Canvas. Canvas is a learning management system. A learning management system is an instructional delivery platform. Its major functions are to supplement face-to-face instruction and provide distance instruction delivery. I say supplement because if I'm a face-to-face teacher, I can still house a lot of content and a lot of things. We've learned this year enormously. I can house all of that on an LMS, or if I'm not, and I'm an online teacher, I use the LMS for my delivery and my interaction, kind of my mothership. the data sharing that happens between our SIS discovery and a gradebook module are scores and grades. So our SIS and its portion of gradebook are mostly talking scores and grades. An LMS has scores and grades. And this is a piece that I want to just take a minute to kind of illustrate, because we'll get often anecdotal feedback, especially amongst the power user group of Canvas, which are teachers, that we shouldn't have to enter scores into gradebook and in Canvas. That's a major frustration we hear a lot. So I want to try and spend a little
That's
time.
probably the tipping point that we've experienced the last couple of years, because teachers used to be all about the one, but they've tipped they've tipped in favor of calling for a change the last couple of years.
Right.
Because they're using Canvas more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Canvas doesn't communicate with Gradebook. That's the frustration I hear. It's not only the double duty, but the lack of, because even my kids will be like, oh yeah, on Canvas, I'm getting a B, but on Gradebook, I'm getting an A.
Yeah, I have a slide to speak to that. I'll show you here.
Okay.
One,
There's a lot of other examples, but.
the piece I want to point out though, so up above you, all of the crossed out things, those are things that an LMS does not do that an SIS does do. So when we hear, hey, let's just get rid of an SIS and just use Canvas as our SIS, we can't. It doesn't do information storage. It doesn't do master schedule building, individual student scheduling. Yes, it does scores and it does some grades, but it doesn't do attendance. It is somewhat of a parent portal, but it reports grades and schedule, I guess. You can look at your kid's schedule on Canvas, but it doesn't do things like tell you their attendance or their assessment history, those types of things. So you can't just eliminate the SIS and just use the LMS, because it's not comprehensive enough to be able to do that. Let me talk Canvas data sharing. And
Actually, Rick, can I interrupt?
yeah, go
you?
ahead.
Isn't there anybody who does both? It seems like it would be logical that somebody would say, wow, this is a huge need in the industry.
Right.
Let's go
There
put this
might
together.
be, and I'm just not immersed enough in it to know what
Maybe I'm going to go create it.
Yeah.
I
That
think
sounds
I
like a
found
great
my new
business-
calling.
Great business opportunity.
I think that's exactly, and I know you'll speak to this in a minute, but that's exactly what the RFP process is. The request for proposal
Is to find that.
is to find those companies. You're
Right.
literally putting out, you're requesting, companies to come in that meet all the all the things we're laying out in that request, saying, yep, we can do that and that and that. And here's how much the price is. And then the committee takes it from there.
Yep.
So, you're on to something, Julie. Trust me, that's the question we as board members have been asking is there a program out there that can easily communicate with each other, balance this SIS need with the learning management system need? I think that's exactly the quest we're on.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I would just say, and Board President Winter's right. The RFP process tries to discover the best solution you're going to get out there. And off the top of my head, I don't know of a product that does both what our SIS does and what our LMS does. I just don't know that in the business world that there's a model for that yet, but we will find out.
So even those who are using, like districts who are using Skyward or Power School or Infinite Campus, they're also having to
They
have
all use
Canvas
Canvas
connect
as
with
well.
it, and
Correct.
they're
And-
going through the same heartaches.
And Canvas is a crucial player. And let me tell you, part of why we got into Canvas a decade ago was because the Utah System of Higher Education adopted Canvas statewide. And so in a very real way, as our secondary schools use Canvas, they're preparing kids for college. And so that was a deliberate choice we made. So I'm much more personally committed to Canvas for our kids' sake than I am to any particular SIS.
And that's an interesting thing. A commonality across school districts in the state is they use Canvas. What's Different is the SIS that they use.
Mhm.
We used to pay for Canvas. UETN now covers that. It doesn't, we don't pay for it out of district funding. Let me talk the frustrations that we hear about Canvas and Gradebook specifically. So from a teacher's world, our SIS or Discovery is really Gradebook because that's what they work in. They're not building schedules. They're not entering data. They work in the Gradebook portion of our SIS. Their frustration is whenever they have to enter data redundantly, right? They just want a place to enter it. And let me illustrate. Canvas has a speed grader feature. It's a rubric feature that makes grading faster. If I do some back-end work to design my rubric and I put it in, and then I have the assignment in front of me, and it just can make grading quite a bit faster. And teachers really like that feature. It pushes into Canvas's score recording piece. When we very first, and this is a distinction between traditional and proficiency based, okay? When we very first started Canvas and Discovery's Gradebook, I'm just going to call it Gradebook, we didn't have an integration. And so there was redundant data entering with traditional grading. And it took us some time and collaboration and some money with Canvas to get that going. So right now, if I'm a 11th grade teacher and I just do traditional grading, I don't have to redundantly enter. We have paid for and collaborated to have those talk to each other. As we've switched to proficiency-based grading, we don't have that integration at this time. So the redundancy between Gradebook and Canvas is with proficiency-based. We just need to go down the road of collaboration and some cost to get that integration done.
Question. I know Canvas bought out Mastery Connect. Do we use Mastery Connect as well?
We do not.
No?
No.
Okay.
But side note, interesting, both Utah companies. Yeah.
Yep.
I will say that, since last semester, I was using Speed Grader and Canvas and Gradebook. I saw, and I was not using proficiency-based grading, so I was on a traditional grading system. That when I went in, I did all my grading in Canvas and expected it to just roll over into Gradebook. And when I would go and look at my scores in Gradebook, they were not the same
I see.
as my ones in Canvas. And so I had to constantly
Double check.
compare the two.
Uh-huh.
And my students, it was so horribly heartbreaking with my students because I'd see this kid thought they had an A this whole time and they had a C.
I see.
And now I did not in good conscience feel good giving them a C when they thought they could have brought it up,
Uh-huh.
So there were those discrepancies are so important and they are really happening.
What I hear you saying, Julie, is even though we have integration on traditional, your experience was it wasn't a tight integration and
Right.
created some confusion.
And I also would add that it creates confusion with parents. And so we have this new thing where I'm receiving an email at the end of the week that says how my kids are doing in each of their classes. And the email is always incorrect.
Uh-huh.
And I can go in and they can show me why it's incorrect. And sometimes it's because the teacher didn't input the grade or
Right.
something. But often it's because it says one thing in Gradebook and one thing in Canvas. And one thing I want to highlight about this problem is that I think it creates mistrust between our parents and their kids. Because their kid says, no, it's right. And the parent says, it says right here from Granite School District, and then you have this.
You're grounded, but I have
you
proof.
cannot
Yeah.
fix that conflict.
Right.
And so I'm just seeing in my neighborhood, a lot of parent-child conflicts
Yeah.
created over
Yes.
this digital problem.
Right. I can imagine.
Can I give you though also the perspective because it's not perfect. It doesn't, to me, Canvas is great for a lot of things, but one of the things that I've discovered, you can't weight it. So if I weight,
Yeah.
like for proficiency, for example, I do 15% on assignments and then I do the other 85% on assessments. Well, Canvas doesn't weight it. So every assignment, I might have 50 assignments in there and only 5 assessments on the standards that I have. Well, when that transfers over to Gradebook or over to Skyward for me, then all of a sudden their grade changes. So I always tell my students, don't ever trust Canvas. That's not your grade. What is in Skyward is that's your grade. And I think
Yeah.
that's maybe where we need to be emphasizing with parents, because until Canvas fixes that part, Canvas is not perfect either.
Well,
That needs to,
and the truth is, what's going on is Canvas doesn't consider itself a grading program.
no, it doesn't.
They're,
And that's the
they're,
problem.
it's an instructional program. They just happen to throw in a grading module that people like to use. We've been kicking ourselves for 10 years for having turned that on. We didn't have to turn on the grading module in Canvas.
It would have been a lot better to.
If people had
not.
never thought about Canvas as having grading utility.
But that speed grader is really great.
That's
We
precisely.
caved
It's
to speed
really
grader.
great.
We caved to speed grader.
It
But-
is.
Can I just mention, we now have Clark Nelson online with us. I saw that he was admitted into the meeting. So officially welcome, Clark.
Thank you. I apologize.
Yeah, this could become a rabbit hole for us, and I know we're on a schedule here, but this is a dilemma that isn't going to be easily solved for the various reasons we're naming here. And I would be lying to you if I thought a different SIS is going to just solve this. It's not going to be that simple for us. We're going to have to work through some things. And it's just this idea of accuracy and speed of data sharing, and then redundancy. We're trying to solve for those things as best we can. I've lost my control. Next slide.
You lost your.
We both lost control. There we go. So collaboration challenges a little bit. So, Canvas is a business. And so when it comes to this integration and having it work, it's got to make sense for them business wise. Their product is really designed for higher ed, but has some utility, and they can make some sales with K-12. And so they want to have some of that market share and do. So it's working through that. Data sharing does exist, but it doesn't exist yet for proficiency based. And that's going to be a piece that we'd have to work through and customize. Let me shift now. If there aren't any questions on that portion, I will shift to RFP. RFP is a request for a proposal. This is not a platform. This is a procurement process. So the 3 areas I want to hit is the process and rationale, how an RFP is developed, and then the steps you take with purchasing. The process is really just selecting a vendor's proposal, and you're looking for best value and best technical solution. Like Karen had said, we're absolutely trying to design a request that hits everything that we want, but at a price that's reasonable as well. So those are the 2 areas of focus when you do a request for a proposal. Where that differs from a bid is bids don't allow for committee scoring, which kind of takes you back to this best technical solution. A bid isn't necessarily on strength of solution. There's not scores that are associated. And with a bid, you're always just going with the lowest price. That's not necessarily true with an RFP. Price is a portion of it, but so is your scoring and how you designed your technical specifications. In the development, a committee comes together and identifies a problem or need. They determine the technical requirements, and then they put together a document that has those indented bullets in that. Everything from your purpose to the scope to what you want to see in a company to the criteria to which you're going to evaluate their product. Purchasing assists the committee with this and puts out a final draft. That goes out on a state level, RFP level that everyone in the state uses, and vendors respond then to purchasing.
There's vendors from all over the country.
All over the
So
country.
it's a state format, but that's responded to.
Nationally, yeah. National vendors are watching everyone's RFPs coming out. So the steps that committee then takes is purchasing issues the RFP, vendors review and put in proposals by the deadline. The committee evaluates those proposals based on the criteria that they chose and the scoring methodology that they chose. Those may include presentations. I think in this case, it will absolutely include presentations. Then scores are calculated in, and the highest scored proposal is recommended to the board.
And Rick, outside of presentations by vendors, I mean, the board really is very hands-off in this procurement process. If you notice, I mean, just think of the agendas we get, right? So a lot of the purchases, the vendors are listed and, and the ones selected, and then the reason that they were selected and all those things. So but I have a question. When you say presentation by vendors, is that to the board or is that to the committee?
To the committee.
Okay. So we don't even have hands-on that. So we are
Correct.
out of the process until it comes into our agenda on something that's been scored and we have a winner.
Correct. Although I think occasionally a board member has been a part of an RFP committee, I think historically. I don't know. I looked to the superintendent for that.
Not for a long time.
Okay.
And the conflicts of interest pop
Couldn't
up
play into
just
that.
immediately.
Sure.
And that's the last time we did that was more than 20 years ago, was that reading task force. And it was that was
Problematic.
Yeah.
So our SIS RFP committee is made up by several employee groups, and they're the employee groups that you saw earlier that are users of the product. So we have each of those bulleted points. We have representation from each of those employee groups on the committee. We started meeting in the fall, and I'll give you our timeline. Do I have a timeline? I do have a timeline.
If I can just suggest something there too, that you two major groups are not represented here, and that's parents and students. And I know they're not employees, so it would be hard to get them, but I think you do have parents and students who care a lot. And so you have parents who would be willing to volunteer and students who would learn a ton from being on that committee.
I think I'm just making a note here, Julie. I think a piece we can make sure we do is make sure they have some voice and give us some feedback on the requirements that we've laid out for our criteria.
Sure.
Costs and challenges. There's always the cost of the product, and usually it's software as a service, so you pay a yearly fee of whatever price. I want to mention, because this is actually what I worry about more, and I mentioned it early on in the presentation, is change costs. The change costs for replacing your backbone are not cheap. It's going to be a challenge, just because it's changing what some folks use all day long, what their work and drive is for.
When we've done this in the past, it's often been a multi-year process where you actually run parallel systems. And most districts do it that way. When they just shift cold turkey, things fall through, and they discover that in November, and then it's a panic.
Yep. Yeah, we are still thinking through how to do that. It's difficult to run two systems simultaneously, but it's also difficult to jump right into the deep end as well.
So this is learning a whole new system for everybody.
And it's not just the learning, it's figuring out how to make sure all the other systems connect to it right. And what are the bugs? And
Yep,
all
the
of a
bugs.
sudden you're saying, oh my gosh, why aren't the buses going to the places they're supposed to be going?
The fun part is the salespeople all say, "Oh, we've got that down. We've got that down," and then the implementation is.
Yes, that's the
tricky.
rough part.
Yeah.
And again, I'm going to go back to our largest employee group, teachers. What this would mean for them is we changed from a Gradebook 1.0 to a 2.0, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, and that was painful. There was some change costs for that. And this would be if we were to select a different vendor, would be pretty big change. So thus, a timeline. This spring, we're continuing to gather feedback on our criteria, our requirements, our scoring. Summer, we're hopefully looking to release that out through purchasing with committee review, presentations, and we've even talked doing some visits. So let's say we have some vendors respond and we want to go out now, and we narrow it down. And we want to go out now and talk to the people using it and sit with a counselor all day and see what they think of it. We want to be really smart about what we're doing here. Thinking a selection in winter with a spring, next spring, so a year from now, developing an implementation plan if it's a new product. And this is back to what the superintendent was saying. What's going to be the least painful change wise to do this? If all goes well, it would be a fall 2023 beginning rollout.
So you're saying that,
All of 22.
Sorry, 22, well, no, I am
I
not.
think it's going to take a year to develop an implementation plan.
Correct.
Develop and implement. So is that-
Because we're confined to kind of started in the fall. I mean, maybe that changes if we semester wise roll out to some schools. It's going to depend on the implementation plan. So
Right.
sorry, yeah. We built a whole year in there because we haven't quite wrapped our head around what's going to be the best way to do this the least painfully.
Well, and we won't know till we have the product.
Correct.
Sure.
So
Okay.
built in some cushion room there.
So my question about discovery, it seems like the gradebook portion is the part that we have, that I've had the feedback on, at least as being the hardest part. We've talked about that. Is there a way just to keep discovery and just switch out that component of it? Or is this all part of discovery?
Yep.
It's just all part of
Yep.
that?
The gradebook portion is discovery. It is the same. It's the same
Okay.
thing. We could
It's all
not,
or nothing?
correct.
Okay.
Now, the LMS is a separate piece that could stay.
Sure. So in regards to what Karen brought up earlier, one of our requests was that we had, an app or some way for them to access. I'm going to be honest, I still don't know how my parent portal login. Are they coming up with that? Is Discovery like, oh, okay, are they looking at this, or is it just like, okay?
Yes, we have a prototype app. Quite honestly, proficiency based threw us off and set us back. And we just haven't gone back to prioritizing it. I think some of that is, well, gosh, if we're going to run a different SIS, do we really want to pursue this with proficiency based look?
do elementary, I mean, there's no negative feedback from elementary about the discovery system?
There's a little bit of a divide, meaning it's basically what you do and use. So for example, if the largest group again is the teacher user
Yeah.
group, it's bigger than the administrator group or counselor group or secretarial group. Elementary teachers use Gradebook, and so they're familiar with Gradebook, and they don't necessarily use Canvas.
Yeah.
Elementary uses Google Classroom typically, although there's some exceptions. So the Gradebook piece and elementary is mostly proficiency based at this point. So they tend to not be as frustrated as secondary can be.
You can't grade in Google Classroom, right?
Yeah.
Oh, can you?
It just doesn't talk to your
So
Yeah.
you have to just double entry. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
this year has shown us that we want to have Canvas K-12
Mhm.
in terms of the having a learning management system. I think it would have been vastly superior to the Google product.
And we only have it.
Right now, we
6,
have it.
12?
Secondary.
Right now, it's secondary. We intend to expand that. We decided to not implement that this year.
Right.
Wisely.
But that will,
Yeah, I don't
and
know.
we'll talk more about that. An easy solution is just for the elementaries to not turn on the grading function
Yeah.
with Canvas. But those are some pieces that are on the horizon, on the near horizon right now as well.
You
So-
spoke to the parent-student exchange around assignments, et cetera.
Yeah.
That tends to be more secondary.
Mhm.
Parents don't watch grades as closely in elementary as they do once they hit junior high school and making sure everything's done.
Well, and I noticed too that with my kids who are on proficiency-based grading, my interactions with them are completely different than my kids on traditional grading, where it's like, you got to get all these assignments in versus how are you learning these things and what do you need to learn?
The
It's a
conversation
totally
can be
different
yeah.
conversation.
Task completion versus,
Which is good.
yeah.
I know, I love that about it. When is our, the implication is that our discovery licensure is up for renewal at some point. And when is that?
That's yearly.
Oh, every year we
Yeah.
have a new,
That's
Yeah.
not a,
We are not committed to a long-term,
Okay.
yearly, we could choose
Oh.
something different.
so every year we just commit to 1 year.
Essentially, yes.
Spectacular. Okay.
And we tend to do that through most everything.
All right, well, we have another presentation to go before break. So board members, are you okay if we move on? All right.
Thank you so much for that, Rick.
That's okay, yes. The next piece is Granted Online and some of our thinking for solutions for next year. Distance learning. Our purpose with Granted Online is to provide flexible and personalized learning options to students, well, Granted families, and provide an option for families that saves teachers from having to teach dual modalities next fall. The first one has been true all along. The second piece has come along with COVID. I want to just frame this a little bit around the gradual release of responsibility lens. This is a pedagogical approach, and it's thinking about I do, we do, and you do in my lesson design and instruction. And I put that in there because it's going to help illustrate some difference in online here. Asynchronous, and you've had a similar presentation before. Asynchronous is mostly I do and you do. It's mostly the teacher giving direct instruction and then the student independently practicing. The we do is minimal in asynchronous online. That has historically been what we've provided through our Granted Online is asynchronous. And I'll speak to that. Synchronous creates opportunity for guided practice, but synchronous means everyone's logging in together at 8 a.m. We are together. But where that is powerful and important is it allows for guided practice or we do. Most students are not that successful without we do or guided practice from their teacher. Our asynchronous version we've had for a decade. This is Granted Online, and it's been high school courses 9-12. It's been open entry, open exit, meaning I start, but I can finish the quarter in 5 months or I can finish it in a month, depending on how much I want to do and get after it. We run 2 cycles. We run during the school year cycle and we run a summer cycle. And the courses over time, and we've seen the demand, Fitness for Life, PE 9, health, digital literacy, financial literacy. That's what people want asynchronous online for.
Is there a separate cost for that during like summer or?
Correct. We run a school year cycle and then we run a summer cycle.
There's a cost for it, an additional cost, or is that just because they're a student in Granite District,
Summer, we do have a cost.
Okay.
We do,
but it's during the school year, they don't have to pay extra?
Correct. Granted Online synchronous is new. That is what I want to share with you today. And this is our thinking moving forward. This would follow the traditional calendar and time schedule. The start of each subject would be starting together for live, and that would be I do and we do. And then there would be some time for some you do. So think of online school right now where you log in first period at first period's time, and the teacher's there with everyone and goes through the I do portion and the guided practice portion, but a student can't spend 7 hours straight on Zoom. So it's not necessarily 90 minutes on Zoom. It would be the I do and we do portion, and then some log off of Zoom, and you're working on this before your next period starts or your next class starts. Is that making sense? So really just aligned, but through Zoom. Elementary K-6, our synchronous solution. So this is all this idea of we are going to have students in the fall. We're going to have families in the fall who want online, who don't want to be back face-to-face, and we want to be able to personalize and provide them an option. This is going to be elementary families. Now, the bajillion-dollar question is how many? That's what we're not quite sure of, and I sweat is how many. We have some ideas, and I'll speak to that, but that's continually the answer becomes, well, it depends, and it depends on how many. But our initial thinking is we are going to hire some elementary teachers to be synchronous online teachers.
Can I just mention an important bullet point not to overlook is the supervision on the K-6. If you choose an elementary online program, you're not being overseen by your neighborhood school anymore. That principal is kind of hands off with those students, because then their supervision is coming from the directors of online learning, more of an online principal type idea. So that's important to mention, because that's different than what we're doing this year.
Right.
So even though we're trying to replicate kind of synchronous, teacher student logging on same time, have those guided practices and sessions with the teachers and students, the actual supervision is not with the local elementary any longer,
Correct.
starting next year.
Correct. And the teacher won't necessarily be a,
Neighborhood teacher.
Correct.
It could be housed in our Granite.
it would be a
Connections.
granite teacher and a granite supervisor,
Right.
but not necessarily out of that school. This is the give or take from dual modalities, is needing to have to do some of that.
So that means then that that child is not considered in the population of the community school.
Well-
And, right?
Let me speak to that.
There's a nuance there.
Yeah.
Later, we'll get to
Yeah,
that
I know.
later.
From an
Okay.
from an
Yeah,
FTE.
I'm interested in the FTE.
We're
Yeah.
going
Right,
to play
that's
with
the-
that with
that's the problem.
FTE. Yes.
Would it be helpful to get through the presentation and have us
No, it's
write
a-
our questions?
Yeah, well, it's okay. We'll work through it.
Because I feel like some of our questions will be answered if we're just a
Yeah.
little patient. I don't know. What would be helpful?
I think time-wise, since we're fast, needing to be faster here, time-wise, if I'll get through it and then you'll hit me with questions, that'll
Okay.
get us there sooner.
That's fair. Are you okay with that, board? There's a pen and a paper, so you don't forget. Write them down. Okay, go for it, Rick.
We're talking location right now. We do want people not working from home and working and collaborating together. So we're looking for a location as to be able to house this group. Class size is always a question. What will be the class size on a synchronous online class? And it'll be the same as a traditional class. Remember, sometimes that can vary. We do have our measure and we do have our number, but different circumstances create some variance there. The secondary version looks a little different. Our strategy for a secondary synchronous solution is not to create its own little school. Instead, it is to buy consultation periods from teachers. So if I'm the art teacher and my consultation is third period, and I'm interested in selling that, I can do so and be a synchronous online art teacher for Granite. This is a nice solution predicated on teachers' willingness. And again, back to how many students is this going to be? We might have to backfill this some if that number of students interested is high enough where we don't have the periods to be able to do it. We might have to make some hires to be able to ensure we have a schedule for students. Now, full transparency, you're going to see some hybriding in the secondary model, just like we do already this year. And you're going to see some hybriding between synchronous and asynchronous to try and build a schedule for a student that they want. And that could be considered personalization if you wanted to look at it that way. But we're going to be using all the tricks that we have to be able to make the best scenarios we can for
But
students.
hybriding does not mean that the same teacher is teaching dual modalities at the same time.
Correct.
I may have 6 periods of face-to-face and 1 period of distance, but not mixed at
Yep.
the same time.
But that's only if you choose to sell your consultation period.
Right.
Correct.
So it's a teacher choice.
Correct, yes. And I was referring to hybriding too from a student perspective. I might attend a couple classes face-to-face. I might attend a couple classes synchronously online, and I might be taking a couple asynchronous online courses as well. So from a student angle, I can hybrid. This is the FTE piece, the funding piece. So we're looking to the elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds, which ESSER, and we'll speak to that maybe in another meeting. The ESSER funding is what we're looking at to be able to provide this solution in the fall. We believe that the demand for synchronous online will be the highest it will ever perhaps be in the fall, and will only get smaller after the fall with this just kind of this concern around safety and COVID. We don't believe the synchronous online market is a giant market. We think it'll probably be the highest we're going to see it come fall, and then it will taper smaller. Not that there'll never be a market for it, but it's just never going to be a big market. And I know never say never, but in the foreseeable future. So we're not going to come after schools FTE. So if my home school again is Jefferson, I live in Jefferson's boundaries, but I'm choosing synchronous online. Jefferson will receive the FTE from me because we're going to pay for that student out of ESSER funds for the online piece. So that works short term. But again, we feel like the biggest number of students will be short term. And then that's going to have to at some point transition back to no, granted online synchronous, they get the FTE for that student. They get the funding for that student. But we're going to start with school. You don't have to worry about it, but it's not a long-term solution. At some point, your online synchronous students, you're not going to get the FTE or the funding for that student. The online school will.
I'm going to say something uncomfortable so Rick doesn't have to say it. And that's that we cannot have schools incentivized to counsel their toughest kids out of face-to-face instruction because they know they're not, Terry's laughing, because they know they're not going to get hurt by FTE.
Yeah.
And so that's a,
Or to try to reduce class sizes.
or to use it to reduce class size, but right.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Rick.
We need them to have some skin in the game, for lack of a better way of saying it, in our solution. And as I put my principal hat and thought of these things happening, you can't get away with that for very long. So what's the point in really
Doing it in
going
the first
crazy
place?
with it?
And
Yeah.
the next slide will show us some of that as well.
Yeah, so
I'm sorry. So I thought you said that they're going to retain their FTE.
For the 2 years.
for
For the
2
first
years,
Only for 2
Under
years.
the ESSER fund.
Okay.
correct.
So in the first 2 years, they have there's
Right.
no incentive to prevent this behavior that we're talking about.
Well, that's going to play in just a second. There will be,
We're going to control for some of that behavior, not like that it would ever happen, but in case maybe it happened,
yeah, in some far corner.
yeah, we would.
That happens subconsciously all the time in education.
Totally
And I think it is subconscious, but
Yeah.
I think it's important to say it does happen.
Maybe some implicit bias type of thing, yes.
So just sorry, quick question with the ESSERs. So did that, I know that
Yes,
list.
yes,
So
we're
it did
good.
get a.
We're
oh,
good.
huh.
Yeah. We were a little worried that the funding couldn't be used for this solution, and we've learned that it can.
That was changed this week.
A way we're going to control for that unconscious piece a little bit is how we counsel students. Quite honestly, we feel like face-to-face is the best thing for kids. But we acknowledge personalization and choice is important as well. The way that students will register and apply for synchronous online will be through their local school. And we'll sit down and have a conversation with that student and that parent and be very clear on how it works and educate and make sure they have an informed decision. We do this already with asynchronous online, and we're just going to model that same type of thing with synchronous online. So if I want to choose that solution in an elementary school, I would go and meet with the administration who would talk me through all the ups and downs of what this decision means. The nuances to this is making sure that that person understands the program, make sure they understand what participation and attendance means in that program, and make sure they understand what they're committing to in a time period. Let me hit those. Participation. We're going to say, if you choose synchronous online and do not participate for up to 10 days, we're going to shift your modality back to face-to-face. It's very clear that this is not going to work. And face-to-face is the better solution. In face-to-face attendance, we already have a methodology for truancy, et cetera, and we would just follow that.
And Julie, this is the disincentive to pushing certain kids out because they might be back in 10 days and now they're behind 2 weeks.
Yep.
So why would you do that to yourself?
Yeah.
That
So
says no participation in all courses. So what if they participate in one course, but then the other 6 have none?
yeah,
then
right.
we'll
This
go-
can
then
kind of
we'll go
become a
hybrid.
sliding scale.
Then we'll make that hybrid. So now you
Stay
got
home
6.
for math, but
Yeah, we'll do a dance around those. We'll be doing some dancing around those. And we see that with face-to-face classes, right? Kid who's participating in one, but not some others. We know how that dance is done. Application process, I think will control for some of that bias. And then again, participation, I think will control for some of that as well. So even if I am going down the dark side and I just want to get Rick out of my hair, he's coming back to me. So it's not really worth the time to try and do that. I wanted to share with you some data that we have. Our current percent of Granite District students who are distance as of last week, and I have it by year in school code, grade essentially 0-0 being kindergarten, and what percentage of all of the students in that grade in Granite District are distance. So we have a ways to go. We need to bring that down. We need to bring that down substantially. And interesting enough, you notice it tends to be the older I get, the more likely I am to do distance.
Rick, are these current numbers as of right now? Because I know the beginning of the year, these numbers look
Much
different
higher,
because
much
second semester, there were a whole lot of kids that felt, I think through
They
all
came back.
grades, that kind of came back to person once they saw how well the schools were doing, how safe they seemed to be.
Yep.
So,
It has been lowering
so this is current numbers.
last week.
Okay.
Now, I don't have it disaggregated, but I can tell you end of first term, we were at 30% distance overall. End of second term, 22%, was it, Ben? 22% at the end of second term. And as of today, I guess I could average those to tell you what it is, but we are seeing it decline. And we did a survey, Ben put out a survey to all our distance learners, and we had enough response to feel pretty good about the data that we got back, and essentially asked them, do you plan on staying distance in the fall? We hope, based on that response, we think we'll have, their response was we would see something like 5% of students distance in the fall. We hope that it's even half of that for our current synchronous solution to be smooth and easy.
Funny.
Do you provide a Chromebook also for
We do.
these students that do?
We do
that?
and will.
Okay.
I have a bunch of questions. Do you want me to just do one or all of them?
Hit 'em.
Okay, so I love Stephanie. Is there gonna be, does she have her admin license?
Yes.
And, okay, so why are we not doing this as like an actual school where we make a principal and have that principal be in charge of that? Because Stephanie, it seems like is this gonna overwhelm her? And
I don't, yes. So
Yes, it
two
will.
halves to that. I don't think it will overwhelm her. I've asked her that. She's quite excited about the
is
whole
she?
idea.
Okay,
Oh,
good,
yes.
good.
But we also, it goes back to, we don't think, I know Jordan created some schools essentially. We don't think that's a good long-term solution because we don't see this being, we see us having just to rescind that whole idea once the numbers drop significantly. It kind of goes back to how many students, how much of a market is there for this? And we just don't believe it's large enough to warrant its own elementary school, its own junior high school, its own high school.
So is there enough of a market though? This kind of goes into my other question, one of my other questions. Will kids be allowed to take, you talk about the hybrid. I know there's kids, like I've got students myself who, the one she's taking math online so that she can have enough room for orchestra and choir and dance and all of that stuff. So is this allowing also not just ninth grade and up, but will this be able to allow some of the younger grades to do, I'm speaking mostly 6, 7, 8, because there's some of that. Now I realize that the requirements are very
Yeah.
loose there, but will this continue to be able to allow those 6th, 7th, 8th graders to fulfill some of those requirements and be able to do that? Or do you see that going away as well too?
I think you'll see the most student hybriding happening at the highest grades. And I think it will taper down. It doesn't mean that we won't be able to think through ways to try and meet students' needs. We will try and do that. It will just be easiest at the start for those highest grades, mostly because the idea of class periods rather than one teacher and our fairly robust asynchronous options are mostly designed currently for 9-12.
Sure. Okay. So you talk about having a secondary teacher sell their prep period. Why can they not do 5 periods and then just pay for the extra FTE to the school while they have, so that they only are teaching 6 and not 7? Because for a junior high teacher, that's 7 periods. That's every single period. For high school, that gives them at least 1 every other day.
Yeah.
So would that be something that we could do instead of selling their prep period? Could they, in a junior high level, just, can we have a teacher and say, okay, you know, we have all of these
4
students.
periods face to face to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that a
Yeah, you know enough
possibility?
to be dangerous, Nicole. Yes, we can do that. Yep.
Because I just.
Let me just jump in and say, this is just a technicality, and Donette and I have just been cringing this whole time.
Sorry, Donette.
The preparation period, consultation period is paid time.
Sure.
We pay teachers a certain amount it's their hourly rate. We pay them their hourly rate to have a preparation period every day. So it's not that they're selling us anything. They actually sign a contract. If I'm going to teach an additional period, then my planning time, my consultation time has to be put in. That time has to be put in at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So just a technicality. So
Yeah.
keep going. I just had to throw that in.
I should have thought of that, actually.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
And this is why we wouldn't necessarily, let's say I'm a AB block teacher and I technically have a consultation every day. So that's 8. We wouldn't try and max them out because then that means they'd have to stay until 7 PM at night.
Sure. And I guess that's why I asked that, because especially after this year where there's been a high burnout, I wonder how many teachers are going to be willing to sell their extra 7, their extra period if they're teaching 7 or 6 already. So that's why I just asked that. The other thing is, how is that going to work as far as being synchronous? That's going to be really hard if you're having somebody who's already teaching doing that and they're having to, okay, well, 6th period is the only period I have, advanced orchestra, but that's also, the other teacher who's teaching well, how is that going to line up? Am I getting into the nuts and bolts?
That's
You're
building a
getting-
master schedule.
you're
We're
getting
building a
nuts and
master
bolts.
schedule, and
Can they,
that's what we
I
do.
guess the reason why I'm asking that is, can they do it asynchronously as well in order to alleviate that problem?
Yeah,
Or
we're gonna leverage some asynchronous. Stephanie's gonna have to build a master schedule across.
Okay, I just
20
wondered if there's going to be
schools.
flexibility there, or it was just going to be like, it doesn't fit, you can't have that. Sorry.
Full transparency, I think you're gonna see some students who say, I want AP this class, and we're just not gonna be able to offer that
Okay,
synchronously online. They're gonna have to choose to take that face-to-face or not.
or,
Yeah,
okay, or
we-
asynchronously do, if we
If
offer
it's an
that.
option, but,
Okay.
but I, by no means am I saying we are gonna be everything to everyone.
Okay,
There is going to be some
Which
pieces.
the
that are not.
comprehensive high school isn't either.
Correct.
Because you run it, you only get 77%.
Yeah,
Which-
or a
which is
class
where
doesn't
we're-
carry and they are unable to
Sure.
offer it.
Right.
okay. So there'll be flexibility, I guess, is the.
We will
question
try and
as
be
far as that.
enormously flexible, but we are not going to be able to be everything to everyone.
Okay, all right, thank you. I'm done.
Right.
I
Let's
had
go to Julie, and then who else has a question before?
I just have a little question.
Little question. Okay, Julie.
Anecdotally, students in the high schools, I think are more likely to be distance learning because they're like working or doing other things during the day that they want to do. So will we have an option for them to have synchronous options that are like at 4 or 5 at night? Or are they just going to be during our school hours?
During school hours.
Okay.
I don't think we're quite, we want to do the best we can with what we got. I think if in the name of choice and the name of personalization, that would be a route to go. We're just not prepared yet to
Yeah.
be there.
Have the asynchronous
Right, they have the
Yes.
asynchronous option. But the synchronous option for, like, I would say is a better option than the asynchronous in terms of how much learning you're gonna get. So that's why I'm like,
But at the very least, I mean, when they sit down with our counselors, they're gonna know what times are offered
Yeah.
for those synchronous classes, and maybe they can talk to their boss and work their work hours,
right.
around
Right.
that.
I just wanted to say that I don't know, maybe it's because I'm in the tech industry, but I feel like we have to be very careful in thinking that this is temporary or that it's just for now, or it's just about COVID. Because I think that there is a movement in education, and we as educators don't like that because we believe that face-to-face is the best thing for kids, and we will push it and advocate for it. But I'm not sure that that is where our world is headed. And I think we need to make sure that we are leaving the doors open as much as we can for us to be innovative with technology. And I mean, when you look at things like artificial intelligence and holograms and all of this stuff that's happening that has exponentially moved forward in the last year because of COVID. I mean, I think we're going to see bigger changes than we thought, faster. And we need to be just sitting with all our doors ready to open, So I just really want to make sure that we're looking at this as this is a potential movement for the future and not just a temporary solution. I feel like that's important to have the vision that could happen,
Yep.
Yep, we will build it and then build it in such a way that
And
we
then
can
see if they come.
scale depending on when they come. Yeah.
Well, and the nice thing with that is once your groundwork is kind of, laid down, I think then you build it up or down according to the
Right.
scale with the level of interest.
And I hope this won't be the only thing that we see change come out of this pandemic experience, because we really should have learned a ton, and we should be coming out of this pandemic new people and a new district with, getting rid of what didn't work and keeping what is working and maybe finding new ways to innovate, because right now we are all shaken up and we're changing and we're growth mindset. And so I hope that we see lots of these kinds of ideas that we start fostering. I think it's really fantastic.
Chris, you had a comment or
It's
question?
Just a quick question. So I know high school's already registered for next year. When were you going to start this rollout for, option that these students would know
Yep.
this is an option, and parents?
Yes, we've started talking to high school principals, but we have not started advertising this out quite yet. We're getting a few other things in place, having a few more conversations with principals, making sure their concerns are addressed, and then we'll start advertising it. And having those interested talking to talking to their counselors at their school.
Okay.
So they may have said, these are the courses I want. When they hear about this, they'll come in and meet and talk through how could that look in the fall if I'm interested.
Do you have a timeline for that? Just because if they're doing,
Weeks. That's a matter of weeks.
gonna
Yeah.
say, they're already doing enrollment in other districts where, well, if Granite's not gonna offer this, we're gonna go somewhere else. So
Right.
it's gonna come out, we'll tell
Yeah.
them soon, right?
Yep, next couple of weeks.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you for both presentations
Yeah,
tonight.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. We are going to break for dinner and we will see you back here at 7. Thanks.